Politeness is something that most people try to instill in their children from a very young age. When girls become women, politeness often evolves into a subconscious defense mechanism to protect themselves from unwanted advances, to keep the peace, and to avoid confrontation. There have been times many women have found themselves in compromising situations because they were too afraid to say no, or to tell a creep to just get lost, all in fear of being perceived as rude and potentially making the situation worse. For one Florida mom, when a man offered to help her buy some items for her kids that she couldn't afford, she got that feeling that there had to be a catch, and like the man's gesture, might have had an ulterior motive. He offered to take her and her children to another store to buy some items that they desperately needed. And the more kindness that he offered her, the harder it became to just walk away. Rain Perrywinkle's fear of coming off as rude or ungrateful would ultimately put her and her daughters in an unknowingly very dangerous situation. And the mistake to trust this seemingly generous man would prove to have grave consequences for her oldest daughter, Cherish Perrywinkle. Hey guys, I'm Elise. This is 10 to Life, and let's jump right in. Rain Perrywinkle was born in 1968 in Brisbane, Australia, and originally was given the name Kimberly Hoy. She was only 18 years old when she gave birth to her first daughter, Lindsay, and Kimberly had a very difficult time adjusting to motherhood at such a young age. Kimberly was said to have a very short temper with Lindsay, and was more interested in hanging out with friends and partying than taking care of her new daughter. Kimberly's mother and older sister would step in to raise Lindsay, and eventually became her primary caretakers due to Kimberly hardly ever being around. In 1991, Kimberly took off to America, abandoning Lindsay completely and leaving her in the care of her family when she was only 5 years old. Kimberly realized that she could have a life of freedom in America without the responsibility of being a mom, and she decided to settle in Jacksonville, Florida. She eventually decided to change her name to Rain Perrywinkle in an attempt to develop an entirely new persona and leave the person that she was, the old original Kimberly, back in Australia and behind for good. Rain would quickly realize how difficult starting a new life completely from scratch really was, especially when you have no help from family who live all the way across the world and who you have essentially left your child with. She needed to get money to support herself quickly, and she decided the best way to do that was to become an exotic dancer at a local club. In 2004, while Rain was working at the club, she met a man named Billy Jarrow, who was in Jacksonville for a short time while serving in the Navy. One thing led to another, and Rain and Billy had a one-night stand, with really no plans of ever seeing each other again. However, a few months later, Rain would realize that she was pregnant, and the timing pointed directly to Billy being the father. She told the friends that she had made in Florida that this was her very first pregnancy, and they had no idea about her old life and her existing daughter Lindsay that she had left behind in Australia years before. So Rain gave birth to a little girl on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2004, and she named her Cherish Lily Perrywinkle. Rain called Cherish her Christmas miracle, and she waited nearly 3 years before she tracked Billy down to let him know that she had a daughter who was more than likely his. After Cherish was born, Rain started a long-term on and off again relationship with a man named Aaron Pearson, and he helped raise Cherish for the majority of her life. However, due to their financial difficulties, Rain decided to bring Billy to court to get child support for Cherish. But Billy wanted to do a paternity test to make sure that this little girl was actually his. Rain denied a paternity test at first, but to get the child support for Cherish, the court ordered that she prove that Billy really be the father. When the paternity test came back as a match, Billy immediately wanted to become involved in his little girl's life that he had already missed so much of. Over the next several years, the courts would slowly grant Billy more and more time with his daughter Cherish, and it took a while for them to bond together as father and daughter since he had missed those crucial first couple of years of her life. At one point, Billy even took Rain to court to try to gain full custody because he didn't agree with the living conditions that she was having Cherish in or the lifestyle that she was subjecting their daughter to. You see, Rain was diagnosed with bipolar disorder after seeking mental health treatment in the early 2000s, and she had a very hard time holding down a steady job due to her long periods of depression and other periods of erratic and impulsive behavior. When she did have a place to live, it was usually unsuitable for anyone, let alone a small child, to live in. Billy and Rain rarely saw eye to eye on how to raise their daughter, and he felt like it would be in the best interest for Cherish to live with him full-time. Cherish was a sweet, playful, and bright little girl. She loved swimming, riding her bike, coloring, and was pretty well adjusted considering the life of chaos that she was thrown into at just such a young age. Even though she and Rain moved a lot and her mother's behavior was unpredictable at times, she was said to be happy and very trusting of people. In 2006, Rain and Cherish were living in a homeless shelter, and this would be the start of DCFS getting involved in their life. There was a daycare attached to the shelter, and on several occasions, Rain would drop Cherish off and not pick her up for sometimes up to 4 hours after the daycare had closed. There were other incidents where Rain was said to have shaken Cherish when she couldn't get her to stop crying. Nevertheless, the court still allowed Cherish to remain in Rain's custody. A few years later, after Aaron got a steady job, Rain and Cherish moved in and had a more long-term place to live, even if it wasn't up to Billy's standards. Aaron had one son from a previous relationship, a previous marriage, and he and Rain went on to have 2 daughters together, who they named Destiny and Nevaeh. While Rain was pregnant with their second daughter in 2009, she was struggling with her untreated bipolar disorder, and she tried to take her own life by taking copious amounts of Benadryl. Aaron even made comments that he wouldn't allow his son to stay alone with Rain due to her erratic behavior, but I guess he wasn't as concerned about his daughters in her care. Who knows why? There were also said to be small incidents of verbal and physical arguments between Aaron and Rain, and even though Billy had a nice home and a stable career, DCFS and the court still felt like it was in Cherish's best interest to stay with her sisters and her mother, Rain. Billy, who was now living in San Diego, California, would get Cherish for extended visits, and in June of 2013, she was set to come and spend the whole summer with him. On June 21st, 2013, Rain was getting Cherish ready for her summer in California to go and spend time with her dad. It wasn't unlike Rain to wait until the last minute, and she still needed to get Cherish a few more clothes items and some shoes to take on her trip. So Cherish needed to be up at 4 a.m. the next morning to make her flight, which she would be taking all alone, all the way from one side of the country to the other, at only 8 years old. Aaron gave Rain a $100 bill to buy Cherish some clothes and told her to only spend 40 of that so that they would have enough for the cab to the airport in the morning. So Cherish loaded up Destiny and Nevaeh in their stroller, and with Cherish by her side, they made the 1-mile walk to the local Family Dollar store. The 4 shopped around a little bit, and Rain bought some of the items they needed for the home before walking across the street to a Dollar General. Rain and the girls looked at the clothing and the shoes, and Cherish found a dress that she really liked that was covered in little hearts. The dress didn't have a price tag, so when they walked up to the checkout, Rain asked the cashier how much the dress cost. When the cashier told her how much it cost, Rain realized she wouldn't have enough money to get the dress and the other things that she needed to get Cherish for her trip. Now, I really want to quickly say, at Family Dollars, Dollar Trees, Dollar Generals, you might be asking, well, how much did the dress cost? It was a dollar store. It was $1. Of course, that's not how it works, which is very, very odd. But if you're not familiar, items in the dollar store aren't $1. They are multiple dollars a lot of the time. So I don't understand why they name it the dollar store, or a variation of, but whatever. That is, I guess, an argument for a later day. It doesn't matter here. But in case you were wondering, well, how much was the dress? It was a dollar store. That's why. So Cherish was really sad that she had to put that dress back. And Rain noticed a man standing near the front of the store who seemed to be listening to their conversation with the cashier. She didn't think much of it because the man walked out of the store while they paid for their items. When the family walked out of the store, though, the man from inside approached them and said, if you really want that that dress, I'll buy it for you. Rain didn't know what to think about his offer and his generosity, because in her experience, men hadn't offered to buy her things unless there was some other motive. He then told her that he actually had a $150 gift card for the Walmart and that he was waiting for his wife to bring it to him. He said Rain could use it for her children because he could tell that she had her hands full and was struggling buying the items. Rain still felt a little uneasy by this, but the more they talked and the more she talked to the man who introduced himself now as Don, the more comfortable she started to feel. He talked about his wife and their little ones and how he worked with children and attended a local church. Rain decided to wait for Don's wife to come with the gift card because now she was feeling desperate, because at this point she was now feeling a little more secure and she was feeling desperate not being able to send Cherish on her trip with any new clothes or shoes that fit her. They waited for around 10 minutes and Rain told him that she had to get Cherish up really early to make her flight to California, and she wondered how long his wife would be. It had started to rain at this point in the parking lot, and the girls were having fun jumping in the puddles and playing with their umbrellas while they waited. Finally, this man Don took a phone call and said that he could just drive them all to Walmart and his wife would meet them there with the gift card. Rain felt apprehensive and said that she'd rather wait for his wife there, but then Don kind of got an attitude and said, "You don't have to do this," kind of like, "I'm doing you a favor," in that kind of way. Rain didn't want to seem paranoid or untrusting because she didn't want him to get annoyed with her and then decide to leave. She really wanted that gift card for her girls, and she felt like coming across as rude or refusing to get in the van would ruin her opportunity to get the things that she really needed. Finally, Rain decided to load up her daughters into Don's white van and ride to Walmart, which was only a short drive away. Now, if you're like me, the red flags are going off. You never get in a stranger's car, especially if it's a van. Also, the mysterious fact that now his wife can't bring the gift card there and you have to get in his car, that's a red flag. This has the nowadays Target human ring scam, if you know what I'm saying, written all over it. She told Don that her stroller was kind of broken and not able to fold up, and he said for her just to shove it in the van. There was a seat taken out of the middle of the large van, so there was plenty of room for the girls to sit in the far back seat and the stroller to be in the middle. Again, seats pulled out of a van. Why? Because they're pulling people in randomly? I don't like it. Rain rode up front, and on their way, they continued to make small talk. He asked how old all of the girls were, where Rain worked, and talked about his life as well. So Rain, by this, rather than seeing the red flags, started to feel even more comfortable. And like Don was an older grandpa type guy who just wanted to help her and her family out. When they arrived at Walmart, they waited for Don's wife for about 10 more minutes. And even though Don's phone didn't ring, he picked it up and said, "Okay, see you soon." Rain figured that his phone was maybe on silent, and he said his wife was on her way. He told the family to go ahead and start shopping, and that he would meet them in the girls' department with the gift card in a few minutes. Now, I can see where you might be becoming more trusting in this moment, because he's allowing you out of the car. He's allowing you into Walmart, into a public place. If his goal in your mind, if his goal or perhaps goal was going to be to kidnap you all or the girls, he wouldn't let you out of the van after he got you inside. So I could see where maybe you would become more trusting in this moment. Like, okay, I got myself worked up for nothing. See, we're in Walmart. This is real. This is legit. So Rain and the girls walked inside, and she quickly started picking out items for the girls and then placing them inside the cart. She made little piles for Cherish, Nevaeh, and Destiny. And to them, $150 for clothing felt like a shopping spree. So a few minutes later, Don comes in, and he joins the family in the girls' department. Rain said that Don kind of stood back and watched while the girls shopped, and he only put one item in the cart of his own, which was a bundle of rope. So any security you're feeling in that moment, and I would think goes out the window when you see that he is putting a huge thing of rope in his basket. And because of this, Rain has been criticized for her trusting of Don, but she still, for some reason, allowed him to take Cherish to the dressing room 2 different times to try on clothing. He and Cherish also looked at the shoes, and he gave her a pair to go ask her mom if she could have. And the shoes were high heels. And Rain said that she wouldn't even wear those type of shoes, let alone let her 8-year-old daughter wear them. She told Cherish to put the shoes back and felt like it was kind of strange, but figured that older men just didn't know what kind of shoes little girls wear, which no man in his right mind is trying to put a child in high heels unless they have a weird fetish. So it was either that she was justifying it or was just overlooking some serious red flags because she was just so desperate for that money. At around 10 p.m., the girls were all getting really fussy because they hadn't eaten any dinner. From across the girls section, Don mouthed and motioned to Rain with his hand, "What do you want to eat?" Cherish ran over to her mom and sisters and said, "We're going to McDonald's. What do you want to eat?" The McDonald's was inside the Walmart, just at the front of the store, and Rain told her to tell Don that they just wanted some cheeseburgers. Don started to walk away, and Cherish caught up behind to go with him to McDonald's. Rain wasn't worried at this point because there were a lot of people around and she knew that Cherish would never leave with a stranger without asking. When Don and Cherish approached the McDonald's, he felt around in his pocket as if to be looking for his wallet. It appeared that he had forgotten his wallet in the van, coincidentally, so he and Cherish made their way to the parking lot. After around 20 minutes, Rain started to wonder where Don and Cherish were, and a few minutes later, the intercom made an announcement that the store would be closing soon. Rain and the girls pushed their cart to the checkout lanes and started looking for Don and Cherish. They went up and down all of the lanes to the McDonald's and the grocery section, but there was no sign of them. Rain started to get a little worried, but was sure that they were somewhere inside of the store. She told Destiny and Nevaeh to wait by the customer service area, and the more she looked, the faster she started walking through all of the aisles until she was eventually running frantically through the entire store. In a panic, she yelled out, "Someone call 911, my daughter's been taken." Rain had left her phone in Dawn's van, but it wasn't working properly anyway because one of the girls had spilled water on it a few days prior. Every horrible possibility started to run through Rain's mind, and a Walmart associate quickly allowed her to use their phone to call 911.
Jackson 911, Robinson.
Hi, I'm at Walmart. I'm in turn. I think I've been taken.
What do you mean?
Taken by a stranger. I can't find her.
And you say you're at the Walmart on Lim Turner?
Yes, I am.
Okay, where did you last see her at?
Walmart. I met a man today at Dollar General. He saw that I was struggling to buy them some clothes. He drove us here to buy us some clothes, and the only reason I went with him because he said his wife was going to be here. Because I told him I don't take rides with strangers.
Okay, ma'am.
He said he was going to McDonald's, and he hasn't been there because the store is closed right now. I had a strange feeling about him when I first met him. He took her to the dressing room twice, and I was hoping that she would be okay. And I was looking at the shoes, and I didn't want him to think that I was overly protective, freaking out. But now they're not here, and I find it very odd because he knew that.
Oh, okay, ma'am. What color vehicle does he drive?
It's a white van. I had a bad feeling. I thought, well, I feel like pinching myself because this is too good to be true. So I got to the checkout. He's not here. He isn't here. And I'm hoping he's not her right now because I've had that done to me. It's not fun. She's supposed to go to California in the morning on a plane. And he knows this. I told him this. He knew when the store was closing. I had a bad feeling about him.
Okay, how long have you been looking for you? When was the last time you saw him? How long ago?
About half an hour ago.
So you've been looking for her for a half an hour?
Yes. There's nobody in the store. And he knew the store was closing. He said he was going to McDonald's. She went with him. I should have told her to stay with me. He wanted her to buy these really tall shoes that were women's shoes, and I told him no. I said they're too high for her. I wouldn't even wear shoes that high. Maybe he was grooming her. I hope to God he doesn't kill her, and I hope to God he doesn't her. I don't want him to kill her. I don't want to be one of those parents that They're going through this. Oh my gosh.
At first, even though Rain explicitly said that her daughter had been taken, the dispatcher called in Cherish as a missing person rather than an abduction. When the police arrived, they initially didn't believe Rain's story about Cherish being abducted, but that was until they viewed the surveillance footage and saw Dawn and Cherish walk to the parking lot and drive away in his van. When they were able to identify who the man was, the situation became even more critical, and it turned out that Cherish was with one of the most dangerous types of predators. Donald James Smith was born on September 4th, 1956 to his 17-year-old mother, Patricia Moore, and a father whom he really had no contact with after his birth. They lived with Patricia's parents, and Don developed a very close relationship with his grandparents as a young child. When his mother got married to a man named Clifton Smith, Don reportedly begged not to have to leave his grandparents' house, and ultimately, the life that they began with his stepfather would turn out to be extremely traumatic. Over the years, Patricia's husband was said to be very inappropriate with her son Don, and there were even allegations that he had touched Don inappropriately. Clifton's job required the family to move frequently, which caused Don to struggle with making friends and to endure ruthless bullying at all of his new schools. It was even said that he had even paid other children to play with their toys, and that he never quite fit in with any of his peers. When Don was 8 years old, two teenage boys who lived in his neighborhood ended up touching him inappropriately on multiple occasions. They also forced him to watch them do the same thing, much more violently, to other little girls in their neighborhood as well. This had a profound effect on Don, and his mother said that only a few years later, at 10 years old, he started to expose himself to other children. It was said that during this time, he also endured a traumatic brain injury on the right side of his head that permanently altered his personality going forward. As a teenager, he began heavily using substances and had his first run-ins with the law. After committing burglaries to fuel his drug habit, he was sentenced to several years in prison, where he was attacked by two fellow inmates after dropping the soap, if you catch my drift. When he was released, his lewd behavior would only escalate, but he seemed to always slip through the cracks of any system designed to protect the public from people with this type of issue. As a young adult, Don was known around town as a creep who flashed himself to children at local playgrounds. It wasn't until 1977 that he was finally convicted of lewd behavior toward a minor, and this was for exposing himself to a girl under the age of 10 and touching himself in the presence of a 5-year-old. He served 1 year in jail and then was placed on probation after being categorized as a mentally disordered offender. In 1981, he was arrested for violating his probation, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In 1991, he pleaded guilty to burglary and grand theft, and even though he could have been sentenced to 15 years, he only received 4 months. In 1993, Don approached a 13-year-old girl named Carrie Ann. She was walking alone to a friend's house a few blocks away. He asked her if she wanted a ride, and when she said no, he became angry and told her to get the F in the van. Carrie Ann started running, and then Don threw his car into drive and drove behind her, cutting her off at an intersection. The girl ran as fast as she could to her friend's house and started banging on the door to let her in, but nobody was home. Terrified, she ran through yards until she got to a playground behind a local elementary school, but Don saw her run behind the school, and she thought that he was going to catch her. Using her wits and smarts, she quickly climbed into a tube slide while Don drove his truck to the back parking lot of the school. She used her hands and her feet to press against the tube slide from inside to keep herself from slipping down, and she waited for what felt like hours as she could hear Don's van still running in the parking lot. He shouted out the window at her, "I know you're in there, you little bitch," and Carrie Ann was terrified that he knew that she was in the slide. Finally, she heard the van pull away, but made sure to wait a few more minutes before climbing out of the slide and running home. When she got there, she told her parents what happened. A few days later, Carrie Ann and her mom could see Don's white van sitting outside of her house. This enraged her mother, and she went outside, causing him to drive away. She and Carrie Ann jumped in the car and sped behind him, writing down the license plate number to the van. They turned the number into the police, and Don was quickly arrested. For this, he could have faced life in prison for the attempted kidnapping alone, due to him being a habitual offender. But once again, he skated by and only received 6 years in prison. After his release in 2001, his stepfather died, and Don inherited $100,000, which he blew in less than 3 months on substances. Even though his mother, Patricia, knew about this, she was in denial that her son had a drug problem. And it's been said that throughout Don's entire life, she always made excuses for him. It's even been said that his mother treated him more like a partner than a son, and that they had a very strange Norman and Norma Bates-like closeness, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Bates story and all of that, but it's a very odd, super close relationship between a mother and her son. He soon was placed in jail again for violating probation for drug charges. Civil commitment proceedings were initiated, meaning that the state of Florida believed that he should be committed to a mental hospital for the safety of others, and so that he could undergo extensive counseling to determine if he would be likely to reoffend. People who are committed to these programs must stay until they are deemed to no longer pose a risk to themselves or others. And in 2002, he was released. As a condition of his release, he said that he would undergo outpatient treatment and receive injections of a drug that would suppress his sex drive. By 2003, he started refusing to take the shots and stopped participating in that treatment program. He was arrested several more times over the next few years, and in 2006, he was evaluated again for civil commitment due to concern of his repeat offenses and impulse control. However, this time he didn't meet the criteria, even though the doctor that did the evaluation stated that he was attracted to children and was a serious predator. The doctor also diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder and believed his brain injury affected his impulse control and sexually deviant proclivities. Over the next couple of years, there was even a point when Don Baker-acted himself, which is Florida's version of a 5150 or involuntary mental health treatment. He said he was experiencing hallucinations and had homicidal thoughts. After treatment, he was released without supervision. In 2012, Don was arrested again, this time for impersonating a DCFS worker and attempting to conduct a RAPE kit on a 9-year-old child. He also called the child and said very disturbing things to them on the phone before it was discovered that he actually was not an employee with DCFS, and it was quickly reported to the police. He pled guilty to the charges, but he only spent around a year in prison. 19 days after his release, an anonymous caller reported a tip to Crime Stoppers about Don lurking around a Walmart in Jacksonville, Florida, and acting strangely toward women with children. 2 days later, Don met Rain Perrywinkle and her daughters at that very same Walmart. The charges we just went over are only some of Don's charges, as he has over 4 decades of offenses like this, as well as multiple psychologist reports stating that he was in fact a danger to society. He kept being released like a monster being let out of a cage, and this time, this absolute monster and freak was in possession of 8-year-old Cherish Perrywinkle, who he had taken from Walmart. After the detectives viewed Don driving off with Cherish around 11:30 p.m., they placed a bolo out for his white van, and a bolo is a be on the lookout. This would later be criticized as a mistake because they knew the vehicle and the description of both Don and Cherish, and should have immediately sent out an Amber Alert for community members to be on the lookout as well. It wasn't until 4 hours after she was taken that an Amber Alert was finally issued. It took 6 hours for the media to be notified of the abduction. At 5:30 a.m., the local Jacksonville news station put out photos of Cherish, Don, and his van. 3 hours later, a citizen called the tip line to report seeing the van from the newscast and seeing the van suspiciously parked behind a church and pulled far into the bushes.
Hi, we're calling about a suspicious van over here, a white van. It was parked behind some bushes really deep, and then we heard that it's not there anymore, but we don't know if he dumped anything because we heard a girl just got abducted from Walmart.
Right.
So we're not sure if that's the van, but a white van was pushed all the way to the back of the bushes this morning.
Near some bushes?
Yes, right behind the church.
While some officers made their way to check out the church, a female officer on Interstate Patrol saw the white van driving down Florida Interstate I-95. She began following the van and requested that another officer join her in the pursuit before pulling the van over. Less than 10 minutes later, the officers turned their lights on to initiate a felony arrest. This is different from a normal traffic stop because instead of the officer approaching the vehicle, they command the driver to exit the vehicle with their hands up. On the officer's dash cam, Don was seen exiting his vehicle. When the officer approached Don to pat him down, he realized that the lower half of his body was completely soaked. The officer immediately yelled out to the officer, "Oh my God, she's in the water." When the initial female officer in the pursuit took Dawn to the police station, the other officer raced to the church where the citizen had said that they saw his van earlier that morning. When he got there, he yelled, "Where's the water? Where's the water?" He was pointed in the direction behind the church and started making his way with his canine through a marshy area with very tall grass. He noticed that the grass appeared to be pushed down, forming a trail that someone had clearly walked through. He saw the trail of tall grass ending at a fallen tree in about 7 inches of water. As he approached the tree, he could see long, flowy, brunette hair floating in the water, and a child in an orange dress pushed up against the tree, and she was weighed down with chunks of asphalt. The officer was overcome with emotion when he realized that his own little girl owned the exact same dress as the child in the water. They found Cherish Perrywinkle, but it was too late. The officer waited there with her, knowing that there were probably alligators nearby, and he wanted to protect her from anything else that could harm her any further. He waited with Cherish until crime scene investigators arrived and took over the scene. In California, Billy, who was Cherish's biological dad, got a call that completely knocked him off his feet. He always had a feeling that Cherish wouldn't be safe unless she was with him, and now his worst nightmare had become a reality. She was supposed to arrive in California for her vacation with her dad that day, and instead he was getting the call that his daughter was dead. Rain was obviously beside herself as well and blamed herself for trusting that someone would want to help her and her family. Dawn waited in the interrogation room for over an hour before detectives came in to question him. When they asked him what he had done that morning, he said that he had been doing drugs with some female adult workers. When they asked why he was wet from the waist down, he said it's because he sweats a lot when he's on drugs. The officers then told him that they had him on surveillance at Walmart, leaving with Cherish Perrywinkle. And at that point, he asked for a lawyer.
Have a seat. We'll be with you in a little bit.
Donald Smith is led into an interview room on the morning of his arrest as JSO detectives try to get answers.
What's your name?
Donald Smith.
Donald Smith?
Yes.
Investigators leave Smith in the room. He sits back and closes his eyes. More than an hour later, homicide detectives come back and read Smith his rights.
If you do answer questions, you have the right to stop answering questions at any time and consult a lawyer. You understand that?
The murder suspect had no intention of talking.
This is an investigation of the abduction and murder of a
Cherish Perrywinkle.
8-year-old female. We'd like to ask you questions about it. You want to talk to us?
No.
Okay.
So they take pictures for evidence.
Other investigators came in and photographed Don's clothes, his muddy shoes, and various scratches and bruises that were present on his body. With so much evidence against him, Don was charged with first-degree kidnapping, murder, and heartbreakingly, RAPE. 4 years later, the trial of Don Smith began in Jacksonville, Florida. In opening statements, the defense made the choice to paint Rain Perrywinkle as an incompetent and neglectful parent, which didn't go over well in the courtroom. After that, they decided to take a different approach and barely cross-examined any of the state's witnesses. The first witness on the stand was Rain Perrywinkle herself, who gave a very emotional testimony about what took place that day.
When you walked outside the Dollar General, did a man talk to you?
Yes.
What did this man look like? Describe him for me.
He's got white hair.
The man who started talking to you, do you see him here in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Could you point to him and describe where he's seated and what he's wearing today?
He's wearing a long-sleeve blue shirt.
With the glasses on top of his head?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant. What did he say to you when you walked out the front door of the Dollar General?
If you really want that dress, I'll get it for you.
Did he make any other comments to you about your children?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, you look like you have your hands full. I have a couple of little ones.
Where was this in relation to the front door? Where was he standing when he struck up this conversation with you?
He was near the front of the store.
Ma'am, looking at the monitor in front of you, is that the location when he first spoke to you as you were walking out the front door of the Dollar General?
Yes.
During the course of that conversation, did he make any mention of a gift card that he may have at Walmart?
Yes.
What did he tell you about this gift card?
He said, I have a $150 gift card. I'm waiting on my wife.
After some period of time, did he offer to drive you and your children to the Walmart?
Yes.
What did he say about his wife and the gift card prior to you all going to Walmart?
He said she's going to meet us there.
Did you believe him?
Yes.
You had seen him in the store before and he talks to you as soon as you come out. Were you originally concerned about him?
Yes.
Why?
I thought he was going to steal my money because he was watching me with the cashier. He was standing on my right shoulder.
So when you go outside and this person you had concern started talking to you, were you still concerned at that point?
Not as much. I thought I was just being paranoid.
Based upon the way he looked, his age, his appearance, did you believe he posed a threat to you?
No.
But when the wife didn't show up in the gold car, did he offer to drive you and your children to the Walmart in Lem Turner?
Yes.
What was your response to that offer?
I waited because I wanted to see her show up. I didn't jump at it right away.
You were still hoping that the wife would come to Dollar General?
Yes.
But she never came?
No.
At some point, did he again ask, do you want to go?
He got snappy with me because I wouldn't get in the van.
What do you mean he got snappy with you? Describe that for me.
He had an attitude. He said, you don't have to do this. And he asked if I wanted to see his driver's license.
He asked whether or not you would like to see his driver's license.
Yes.
Did this sort of make you feel more comfortable?
Yes, I felt foolish after that. I thought I was just being paranoid.
Why were you hoping that this gift card was real?
Because Cherish needed some clothes for a trip.
Did you tell the defendant that Cherish was going to California the next morning?
Yes, I did.
Did you have any concerns while you were driving in the van with him?
Not so much because he told me I was safe.
He told you that you were safe?
Yes, he looked into my face and told me I was safe.
Did you want to believe him?
Yes, very much so.
Was that gift card something that you really wanted to be able to get stuff for your children?
Yes.
The jury viewed surveillance footage that outlined the events of that day back in 2013. They saw the family arrive at the Dollar General, Don approached them, and the family leaving with Don in his van. Then they saw them shopping around Walmart, and then Cherish following behind Dawn to his van and being driven away to her death. The officers who apprehended Dawn and discovered Cherish in the water took the stand, but the next witness would be the most harrowing and emotional testimony of the entire trial. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Valerie Rowe has conducted thousands of autopsies in Jacksonville, Florida, but she said that the autopsy of little Cherish was the worst that she had ever done. The court had to view extremely disturbing images of Cherish's hundreds of injuries, and members of the jury could be seen crying during the medical examiner's testimony. With the exception of multiple ant bites, she determined that all of the injuries Cherish sustained happened prior. She went through images that showed injuries to Cherish's neck and indications that she had been strangled using a thick ligature, such as a piece of clothing. She had cuts and bruises all over her body and injuries to her eyes, nose, lips, chin, and gums that indicated that she had forcibly been kept quiet. These all were signs that pointed to a level of torture. There was also blunt force trauma to her head, broken blood vessels in her eyes, and the worst injuries of all were sustained during the very vicious acts that Dawn inflicted on Cherish sexually. I'm not going to play the entire testimony here because it is so graphic, but it is online if you want to watch it. I can't even imagine having to be in the courtroom to see what those jurors saw. Dr. Rowe said that Cherish had gone through so much trauma that her lower anatomy was completely distorted by the injuries and could be seen on the outside of her body, if you gather what that means. After this portion of her testimony, Dr. Rowe had to take a break because she became so overcome with emotion.
You mentioned earlier that during an autopsy, you take dissections.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you noticed an area in Cherish's back of her head. Where you,
yes.
So you shaved her head?
Yes.
And then cut her scalp so you could look at the injury more closely?
Yes.
And did you photograph that?
Yes.
And what I'm going to direct your attention now to States 84 and ask you to explain to the jury what is reflected here.
When the scalp is reflected back, you have an area of hemorrhage right there.
I'm sorry, where?
On the left side of her scalp, right there.
And how is that caused, Dr. Rao?
Blunt trauma.
I'm going to show you 2 more photographs of the dissection taken of Cherish Perrywinkle's throat. Will you first tell the jury what you saw when you dissected her throat?
Yes, so what we do is, I'm sorry, I have to take a break. Can I just have like 5 minutes?
Do you want a 5-minute break? I think we'll all take a break for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Later, Dr. Rowe explained that Cherish had bruises on her lower private areas that are the types that you would associate with a hickey. She also did an examination of Don to gather photos and evidence, and she showed pictures of injuries to his lower region, including bite and scratch marks. DNA was found in various places on Cherish that undeniably proved to be that of Donald Smith. In another heartbreaking visual, the little dress that Cherish was wearing was brought into the courtroom, which just reminded everyone how small, sweet, and innocent she really was. Dr. Rowe concluded that Cherish died as a result of mechanical asphyxiation by ligature.
Do you have an opinion as to how Cherish Perrywinkle died?
Yes.
And what is it?
Mechanical asphyxia.
Will you explain what that is to the jury?
So what she sustained was tremendous force on her neck, such that she could not breathe. She suffered swelling of her brain as a result of lack of oxygen to her brain, and as a result of which she died.
In an unexpected decision, the defense decided to not even provide a closing statement. In the words of Don's attorney, what could they say? In fact, they only called one witness to take the stand, which was to show Don's history of past behavior. Usually, a defense doesn't call a witness who can make their client look worse, but it was a tactic that they were going to utilize later in the sentencing phase of the trial. The witness they called was the 13-year-old girl who Don had attempted to abduct in 1992, Carrie Ann Buck.
I'd like to direct your attention to September 27th of 1992. How old were you at that time?
13.
And on that Sunday afternoon, were you in your neighborhood leaving your house?
Yes.
Was that after church that morning?
It was.
Where were you going?
I was going to my friend Tamara's house.
Did she live within walking distance of your house?
A few city blocks, yes.
As you were walking to Tamara's house, did you encounter a man in a van?
Yes.
Did you get a good look at him?
I did.
Did you see his face?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the man who was driving that van in this courtroom here today?
Yes.
Would you please point him out and describe where he's seated and what he's wearing?
There at that table in the orange.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant, Donald Smith.
The record will so reflect.
He was coming toward me and had stopped. He pulled more toward my side of the road and asked if I knew a girl named Susie.
What was your response to him?
I told him no.
Did he ask you if you wanted a ride?
He did.
And what was your response to him?
I told him no.
What happened after you told him no to the ride?
He told me to get the van.
How would you describe his voice?
Mean. Scary.
When he said this to you, what did you do?
I ran.
Where did you run?
I headed toward my friend Tamara's house. At the time, it was all I could think of to do.
Did the defendant chase after you in that van?
He did. I'm sorry. I tried to run to Tamara's house. At one point, he had cut me off at a crossroad. And I just kept running. And I did Tamara's house and no one was home, and I pounded on the door and no one answered. Behind the school there was a small playground, and there was a big, like a tube slide in the playground, and I got inside. I was pushing out with my hands and my feet inside this. I was slipping, and I was so afraid I was gonna fall out and he was gonna find me. He said, "I know you're in there, you little and I'm gonna find you."
Did you try to remain hidden?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you try to remain hidden in the slide?
I did.
How long do you think you were inside that slide hiding from this defendant?
It seemed like forever.
It only took 15 minutes for the jury to come back with a guilty verdict, and they recommended that Don be sentenced to death.
We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Donald James Smith, should be sentenced to death. Yes. And so say we all, this 22nd day of February, 2018, and signed and dated by the foreperson.
Florida is a death penalty state, thank God. And the trial then moved into the sentencing phase, where the defense would call many more witnesses in hopes to show why Don should be spared from the death penalty. The defense called several doctors that worked with Don over the years. The doctors did their best to implicate themselves as little as possible for their responsibility in Don being released to the public. Some felt like when they spoke to Don, he seemed very lucid and coherent, and felt like he could have been malingering his symptoms to other doctors. Other doctors said he was one of the worst and most dangerous predators they had ever come across, and him being in the general public was a failure of the systems that were put in place to keep people safe. Some said that his brain injury, along with a lifetime of SA against himself, made him unable to control his impulses, and that the system not only failed the public, but Don as well. A forensic neurologist said that Don's bizarre behavior was due to profound atrophy of his brain, and that he could have had a neurodegenerative disease such as dementia, which would explain his hypersexuality and disgusting impulses. The state then brought out a shocking new piece of evidence that nobody was expecting, and that was secretly recorded conversations between Don and another inmate in solitary. And they had these conversations through the air vents of their cells. These conversations are seriously grotesque and prove that Don has no remorse and is in fact almost proud of his attraction to others. A camera was also secretly placed above him during conversations with his mother, and he could be heard devising a plan to come off as insane. He even asked her for a copy of the DSM-5, which is a book used by psychologists to diagnose mental health disorders.
It manifests itself in a million different ways, but every year I would think, well, what am I going to do about it this year? Am I going to just go to my grave sick and hiding and alone? Or am I going to do something about it? Too much to face. I'll never be able to work through it. You know, that's what I'm telling myself. Never be able to work through all this. Never. I'll never be okay. So rather than spend the rest of my life being humiliated by myself, telling all this crap in my head, I might as well just die with it. Easier to just die with it because I'll probably never get through it anyway. That's what my brain's telling me. Never be able to work it all out. Anyway, don't have the capacity, that much honesty. I don't know if I can handle. I don't know if I can face that much. Don't know if I could. I mean, I'm already so separated from society already, you know, because of my thinking, that if I were to start admitting, you know, and start disclosing, I don't know anything about a healing process. I thought it was just, you know, okay, now everybody knows, but nothing's going to change. So now I'm worse off than when I started. That's the way I feel, you know what I mean? But that's the reason I really kind of want this, because at every turn, for some reason, I mean, they can't spot it. They can't spot it. I don't know. They can't spot it. Maybe I'm too lucid, and I'm not like, you know, like you see guys, or like, you know, you see them like that. I'm not like that. But still, I was out 3 weeks, because it is so crazy, you don't know what to think. If I had a gun, I'd blow my freaking brains out. That morning, all the police came up on me. I thought about it. About taking the wrenches and Charlie, working on that back seat, putting it right there, jumping out of my truck and kill me. But you know why I didn't? You know why I didn't? Not because I was scared to die. I knew I was dead already when I saw her. Because I would never be able to say goodbye. And I would have just left this earth, and you never know what happened.
He said that he was terrified to go to prison because people like him would be killed, and he didn't want to go his whole life never knowing when he was going to die, and that he would rather live peacefully on death row, where he'd be given the opportunity to at least say goodbye to his beloved mother. In more interesting recordings, we kind of get a look inside the brain of someone like him, and murderers who just snap.
There is no way. You crazy. Would plan to go over all each other and try. There is no way in this world. No way. I'm not that. Family Dollar. I was in the Family Dollar. I was on Edgewood. I
I don't know about you, but that sounds like insanity to me. Don't get me wrong, Don is pure evil and knows right from wrong, but that description truly sounds like a crazy person having a mental health episode. However, he is right where he needs to be, and the fact that he told his mom he wasn't planning on doing any of that, and Cherish just showed up in his van when he walked to the parking lot is total BS. Why would he lie to Rain about having a wife and about the $150 gift card if he didn't plan on doing anything to one of her kids? Why would he act like he was going to buy them stuff from Walmart if he had no plans of doing so, unless he wanted to take one of her daughters? He took advantage of a mother who was clearly struggling and was easily manipulated and vulnerable, and then wanted to place the blame on Cherish, saying she just wouldn't listen and stay away, and he just had to kill her once and she was in his van. Also, why would he buy that rope? In other clips, he also sounded freakishly excited about how famous he was, and now that his case was much bigger than Casey Anthony's case.
Okay, the taxi cab killer that was here, Paul DeRusso, this is bigger. This is bigger than that. This is bigger than all of that. This has got every major component in the system that makes this one of the most explosive cases that's ever come out of Jacksonville. Because they have upgraded, and I'm not trying to scare you, they have upgraded my case to premeditated capital felony murder. I'd have been better off trying to kill the president. I wouldn't have got this kind of press. The worst charge that you could ever get. It's the worst charge you can have in the history of anything. It's the worst. And coupled with, that makes it emotional. I'm telling you, it's a powder keg. It's a powder keg. I could easily see it turn into a riot downtown. I'm telling you. It's that big. I don't know if you realize it. Yeah. This is way bigger than anything. It's way bigger than Anthony. Capital. First, premeditated. Capital murder. Capital, it's the charge. Capital sexual battery on a minor under the age of 12 and kidnapping from a Walmart. Those ingredients right there are a nuclear bomb. You have kidnapping, you have death, and you have of a child. That is explosive material to the max. Haley Anthony didn't have all that. She was just missing. Look at that. They have bodyguards all around her. They didn't know whether the child's dead or not. Just missing. This is huge. Be aware. It is huge. It's as big as anything that's ever hit. It's as big as any Jimmy Rice or anything like that. It's that big.
During sentencing, the defense brought in another unexpected witness, which happened to be a son who was born during a short relationship Don was in at age 25. Don Smith Jr. said his father was largely absent through his whole childhood, and he didn't get to do things with his dad that normal kids got to do due to Don Sr.'s addiction. However, he was in college to be a minister at the time of the trial and believes in forgiveness, and now he speaks to his father twice a week. He said he's closer to his dad and to his paternal grandmother than anyone else in his family.
I didn't have that father figure around to lead me in the right ways.
Don's mother, Patricia, also gave a statement, and this statement said, and put this up on screen, "As Don's mother, I know the loving side of Don. I never thought in a million years I could ever believe my son could be capable of hurting another person. If I could just relay to Miss Perrywinkle how deeply, deeply sorry I am for the loss and how I feel for her as a mother, I'm deeply sorry about that." In May of 2018, the judge followed the jury's recommendations and sentenced Don to death for what he did to Cherish Perrywinkle.
The jury's recommendation without reservation. Accordingly, this court finds that death is the only appropriate penalty for the defendant, given the highly egregious nature of this crime.
Over the years up until 2022, he has filed several appeals, citing that he should have been given a change of venue, that the attorneys failed to properly defend their client, and that the expert witnesses influenced the jury, such as when Dr. Rowe became emotional and when one doctor stated that he was the most dangerous predator she'd ever met.
Mary, I spoke with a criminal defense lawyer who's followed this case for years. She says that Donald Smith, even when he was on trial here years ago, was probably planning to do something like this, knowing he'd likely be convicted, and his only way to really escape the death penalty was keep appealing this for years and years. That's happening now. This is the 78-page appeal filed by lawyers for Donald Smith. It took 5 years for the case to go to trial, which ended with a unanimous death sentence. And now we're seeing his appeal, which cites multiple things in his trial that he argues invalidates his original conviction. Here are just a few. First, he claims his lawyer was ineffective for failing to identify, interrogate, and strike a biased juror. That's one of many complaints. Also, that his lawyer didn't do a good enough job on things like failure to object to the 911 call and failure to object to digitally altered photographs. The appeal also hits a mental health expert who testified that Donald Smith was the most dangerous she had ever met.
All of his appeals have been denied, with his conviction and his sentence upheld all the way up to the Supreme Court. During and after the trial, many people were critical of Rain's choices and also said that it seemed like she enjoyed the attention she was receiving from the media. She went on several different shows to try to clear her name, with people accusing her of giving away her daughter for a gift card. After Cherish's death, DCFS got involved with the family again and ended up placing her 2 younger daughters in foster care due to the conditions in the home. They were in the foster care system for more than a year, and there were several criteria that Rain needed to meet to get her children back. She needed to get a stable home and a steady job, but she failed to do either of those things. Some people believe 1 year after the death of your child isn't enough for someone to get their life together, and that Rain shouldn't have had her children taken during the hardest and lowest period of her life.
We talked to her mother. I spent most of the morning with her, and she said she didn't want to go on camera yet because she's too upset, but she wants the community to know what a big imagination and heart her daughter has. We talked to Cherish's mom's boyfriend in an interview today.
She's a wonderful girl, absolutely wonderful girl.
Aaron Pearson says he's helped raise Cherish Perrywinkle since she was 10 months old.
She was so smart, she was so beautiful, she was always so happy. She was a great little artist. She loved to draw. She loved to read.
Cherish's mother was shopping with her 3 little girls Friday night when she says a man inside Dollar General offered to buy them clothes.
This man, you said his wife was coming with his children with a gift certificate that he just wanted her to have, and somehow managed to, talk her into giving a ride to Walmart.
They went to Walmart and made their way through the aisles.
Rain was busy looking at the clothes, and he talked her into going to McDonald's, Cherish, and by the time Rain realized what had happened, they were gone.
Cherish followed the man to the McDonald's inside the Walmart, and that's the last time her mom saw her.
Rain's the type of person, she won't even get in a car with me with somebody from work or somebody she doesn't know. I know there's a lot of people saying things about Rain, and I just really want people to know Rain has such a wonderful mother, and I really want people to know that.
Her mom says she told Cherish just last week, never leave a store with a stranger.
This is the most horrible thing I've ever, it's a worst nightmare. It's a worst nightmare.
Other people's opinions changed when they learned that she actually had another daughter that she abandoned in Australia and felt like her bad parenting was a pattern of behavior. Her oldest daughter, Lindsay, did a few interviews along with Rain's sister who helped raise Lindsay and said that she blames her mother for what happened to Cherish.
I'm related to that person, that's my mother, and it just makes me feel sick.
Her own daughter doesn't want a thing to do with her.
I've never wanted to have anything to do with her because of who she is. But she's a bad mother.
Her sister refuses to talk to her.
Quite simply, is she the world's worst mum?
It's the worst I've ever heard of. Worst case of child neglect that I've ever heard of.
I wouldn't wish this on anyone.
Clearly, Rain Perrywinkle doesn't think she's a bad mum.
And the nausea I feel, and the pain, and the agony, and I don't want any mom to have to go through what I'm going through.
She's my sister, and I love her, but I'll never forgive her for what she's done.
Rain's sister Kerry and Rain's oldest daughter Lindsay say Rain is the reason one of her children is dead.
It's terrible, but I think about it every day. I can't sleep. You know, so it's been a year and it feels like it was just yesterday. As soon as I start thinking about it, it kills me. So.
And Lindsay, can I ask you who you blame for what happened to Cherish?
My mother, 100%. Oh, you know, that pedophile was going to get any child, was going to get somebody, he was going to do it to someone. And he saw my mum as an easy mark.
He was a known pedophile.
40 years history, 4 decades of sex offences and crime against children.
I thought I taught them everything about stranger danger thing, but he was smarter than I was.
Even more distressing, before she was murdered, little Cherish begged her grandmother Leslie to let her come and live with her in Australia.
I don't really think they were being looked after, and it really worried me. I really think there was something was going on.
Do you feel that the community and individuals are really blaming you for it?
Yes, a lot of them.
In the States, Rain Perrywinkle has become big news.
If I could say one more thing to Cherish, what would it be? Wait for me at the gate.
She's enjoying being a public figure and really doesn't understand that what she's done is so wrong.
Rain's sister and her husband ended up adopting Destiny and Nevaeh after Rain could not meet the criteria in that time frame given by the court. This was a very controversial decision because Aaron and his family wanted to take full custody of the girls, but he lost his parental rights as well due to his home conditions. So they now live in Australia and are said to be thriving with their new parents. I'm curious to know what you think about this case because, believe it or not, I really didn't go into too much detail about the more brutal aspects of what happened to Cherish. Just believe me when I tell you that Dr. Rowe's testimony is something that stays with you. I know many people have been critical of Rain, and she definitely did make a lot of mistakes. However, I believe she is a victim of someone taking advantage of her vulnerability. Was she naive? Yes, absolutely, hands down. But I don't think she intentionally put her daughter in harm's way, and now losing all of her children is something she will have to deal with for the rest of her life. I know she and all of us wish that she would have just listened to her initial gut feeling and not gotten into that van. The dispatcher who took the 911 call from Rain received a suspension for not properly relaying the situation was an abduction, and the 2 officers who didn't immediately file an Amber Alert were reprimanded and placed in another division. If they would have gotten the word out sooner, it's possible that Cherish could have been saved. We saw how quickly a person reported the van after the media released the images, and that just shows that Amber Alerts and the media really do work in finding missing children. In this case, it just happened to be too late, and we'll never know how things could have been different if it was released sooner. Regardless, Cherish touched so many people's lives after her death, but she shouldn't have had to die to be the reason that Dawn was finally taken off the streets for good.
But no, it's not justice. You know, the legal system works the way it works, but he's been living for 5 years after the death of my daughter, and he's going to be living until the death penalty is either done or whatever the case may be, and that's not justice. She didn't get that option to live those many years. She was, wow. It's hard to explain, but you'd never see her unhappy. She was never miserable. She never had any signs of anything. She was just smiling, just the biggest smile on her face every time you've seen her. And I know if you talk to people in Jacksonville, they'll tell you the same thing. To have an 8-year-old be taken out like this is just unreal. I just hope they remember her smiling face and the fact that she had a good life ahead of her and would have probably been very successful at something. But we'll never know now.
There were so many systematic failures of the systems meant to keep children like Cherish safe, and Dawn should have been locked away for good a long time ago. So I hope that if this story and this case teaches anybody anything, it's to always trust your instincts. And don't worry about coming off as rude to someone who makes you feel uncomfortable. I know Rain didn't want to seem ungrateful for the help that Dawn was offering, but someone who wants to help you should never ask you to go to a second location or pressure you to get in their car. It's a common tactic for predators to try to make their prey feel guilty or paranoid about being uncomfortable and then going with them against their better judgment. Just please never accept a ride from a stranger, especially with your children, and don't be afraid to say no if something feels wrong. Trust your gut. Hopefully, learning about what happened to Cherish will cause more people to notice more red flags and keep themselves and their children safe from people like Donald Smith. I know this was a tough one to hear today, guys, so I appreciate you sticking with me. Please take a quick second to support the channel by hitting the thumbs up button and subscribing if you haven't done so yet. Totally free to do. You just press that little subscribe button below. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and until the next case, stay safe. Bye.